Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Guile treatment. Today we're going to be going back a bit. When we did our year in review, we had initially thought about doing a look back at like some of the decks from the year, and then basically completely forgot about it. So we wanted to look back at sort of the year-end decks for 2017.
Sounds good. Well, I necessarily didn't pick all of the winners. I picked a few good decks, I thought. But Rob, why don't you start us off, I guess, because that's what we said in the cliff notes, the liner notes at the beginning of the show. You were going to start us off, so.
Well, I thought maybe you had something to add to the
I don't. Man, you take care of the intro so well. I don't need to do that. I do that on my other show, man. You're good.
So Chris didn't pick the winners, but I did. For the Vegas PTC, which first event of the year happened, I believe, January out in Las Vegas.
No, it was February.
Now, see, gotta cut that now. So this is the sort of first appearance of the deck that Kevin played for most of the big events of the year. His Psyche deck that used Fort Negley Restored, it was sort of termed the Pillow Fort. Now, this is like the first iteration. I think it's the only one we're talking about, but it's interesting if you compare this to some of the other decks throughout the year, how it changed, how it sort of evolved at Worlds and then UK Nationals and US Nationals. Now, this, he ran like a tight 60 cards, which he loosened up on a lot by the end of the year. And this one was really focused on Foundation Destruction. It's like 4 Hyperbomb, 4 Shell Kick, 2 of the Ultra Rare Robert Kick, all of which, target or all of which destroy Foundations. He also was only running 2 Cowboy Battery, which obviously became more of a meta staple later in the year. Card's pretty good.
Saw that. Yep.
Psyche can kind of get momentum whenever he wants. So, you can really look at this and see that it's a little bit of a sort of a still in development list, especially when you compare it to later on.
He did have one in the side. Sorry, he did have a Cowboy Battery in his sideboard. So.
Okay.
So at least he had 3 in the deck, at least technically.
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially.
Now, one of the things that he reminded me of is at this time Diplomatic. I don't know if it had gotten its first errata or second errata or whatever it was, but he could still burn people with Diplomatic using Pulled Imagogen. So I think he was really kind of like trolling people at this event. And, it turned out that his deck was still good enough that he was able to win. I don't think there's too much more to add about this. He only ran 3 Negleys because just in that 60 card limit, it was something that you want to see early. You want to see every game, but seeing 2 of it is awful. And he said that once he started expanding the deck more to about 70, 75, that 4th one became like sort of more tolerable to add to the deck. So, which deck did you end up picking?
I went with 5th place finisher Yari Melcher's Turbo Man Off Life. Basically, this was the precursor to his Worlds deck that he took to Worlds later in the year.
Now, his Worlds deck was on Void.
Was on Void, though, yeah. So, the Foundation base they share so many cards. It's pretty similar. He basically ran the Slam package, Beast Cannon, Turbo Slam, Diving. He ran Diving Beast Cannon, which I don't remember if that's the speed or the damage one, but I don't think it really. I think Diving was the.
It's the low one. I know that.
Yeah, Diving is the low one, I believe. Ran 4 Scorch Wheel. He played a Soul Trap. I think that was kind of interesting because I think him being a 7-hander could get blown up on reversal. So that's really good. He ran 3 Transform, 3 Revoke, which is I think which is weird because he didn't play Templar main board. He sided it. One cool thing that I thought that he ran in this was Arrogant and Overconfident. So if your opponent was outbuilding you, you could drop it, bring it down, and tap it for 2 and 2, a Turbo Man. So that's kind of cool. He did run 7 of the recheck Foundations.
Yeah, I see that.
4 Lesson in Magic and 3 Pravnos, which both of them would later be banned.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because he was running the 3 turbocharge.
Yeah, he was running the 3 turbocharge. I played against, like, earlier, well, last year, the year before this, in 2016, I played against Slam in Michigan, and he had a list similar to this, where he would just turbocharge on turn 1, if he could. Mm-hmm. Another thing I wanted to point out, too, he didn't play Lonely in the deck. He didn't off-symbol Lonely at all, which is kind of weird, because normally I think that may be his best foundation. Turbo Man,
at least. That's that's something that's really easy to off-symbol for Turbo Man.
Mm-hmm. Which I thought was kind of odd, but I think he played a tight 60, so he might not have had enough space for it, even at a 1X. But I thought the pieces in the deck were pretty lifey, which is it's just a life deck. It had spiders, had hidden laughter, caught red-handed, petrol. It ran 1 Team Psycho Soldier, which is kind of cool because if he was going in on a turn, he could just drop a useless card down and still tap it for 2 and 2, and then blow it up for 2 more speed, which is pretty sweet. Especially if you're scorch wheeling people to death. So it just
that's gotta be. Doesn't Team Psychos? Oh, you're saying he could commit it to put it down? Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he can commit it to put it down, and then he puts one down, and then he commits the card he put down, and then he blows up the card he committed. So that's huge plussing right there. His sideboard played a lot of anti he had 2 Wile's Master Creation. The only asset hate that Life technically had at the time.
Here's the thing: is Weiler's Master Creation that doesn't have life? That's just a void card.
Yeah, it's just a void card. Yeah, so maybe he left that for certain matchups that he couldn't deal with. So he thought the off symbol with his first F would be fine. So, but I see that he could have cut at least one card, maybe to drop a Lonely in.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like that's something that...
Especially at 60 cards, I thought maybe he could have, he might have... But maybe in testing, he didn't like it. So he ran Rochester CCG. It's a card that doesn't... That card does not get enough play, man. So
I've run that in the sideboard of decks, so...
Yeah, me too. I've never mainboarded it, but I've definitely sideboarded it. So you want to take us on to Atlanta?
I picked my deck. You may have heard of it. I played Zoe.
Nah, I've never heard of it, man.
So I was inspired for this by the deck that I played against at the Rockford PTC the year before, the mature deck that was all attacks. And so I kind of took that approach where I wanted to use Zoe's form every single turn. And the easiest way to guarantee that was to run a bunch of low diff attacks. And starting with Gravity Hold, because that didn't count, and then some 3s and 2s. It started out even higher. It started around almost 40 or 50 attacks. And as I started making some changes after I had some problems against decks that could either hit some of my damage pieces like Improved Design or could gain a bunch of life. I mean, basically just Dimitri.
Yeah.
So I needed other ways to kill people, which is how I ended up getting to the Cowboy Batteries, which I picked over Flying Spear just because it had that 3 check. And because I was throwing so many attacks, it wasn't the 6 speed on Flying Spear was that important to what I was doing. And yeah, I mean, I really playing this. I mean, I really took the field sort of by surprise. There were a lot of games that I played where we were halfway through game 1, and my opponents just looking at my discard pile and starting to count attacks, and their eyes kind of get a little wide. They'd be like, "Wait, how many attacks are you running?" And I just sort of smile and let a lot. So I mean, this is sort of the deck that kind of kicked off some of the other Zoe decks for the rest of the year while she was legal, and I think really also helped to put Gravity Hold on the map for some of the other decks that ended up running it, which at least one of which we'll be talking about later.
Oh, definitely.
I guess the if you look at this list, it was really designed around the fact that you expected to check 3s. There's not a lot of high diff foundations. I think the only one is Ever Hopeful. I mean, Bridging the Races, stuff like that. I mean, it was really designed to, have to tap cards to pass things, and I really wasn't going to be blocking a lot of stuff just because on basically any turn I could play every card in my hand. And my blocks were okay, but I wouldn't have that many foundations because I would either check bad and like kind of tap out, or I wouldn't build that many foundations in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's, you see some of the skull barriers, and I mean, on the sideboard I had like that stop, which the idea was to slow characters down, but then it ended up being that the +3 block almost wasn't even worth it. But you see like the Journey West too. There are definitely some things that I think I would have changed about this at the time. I definitely would have run like a Second Ever Hopeful. Some of the other cards didn't quite make the grade. Like Rolling Uppercut just wasn't worth it. But yeah, I mean, this was something that was kind of like experimenting with, sort of a different way of building a deck that I had seen someone else do, and I thought I could apply it where, I mean, Mature, so because of her form, like when she checked attacks, they were 5s.
Yeah. And
like I didn't have that, but I also could like get -2 progressive at any point.
Yeah.
So this deck was busted.
Yeah. Because going back to your not blocking thing, is most of the time you were putting your opponent in desperation on your turn 1 if you're going second, or your turn 2 if you went first, because you were just be able to blow out your opponent so fast, you just put them on defense. So you were just dropping your hand, and it's just like, okay, well, I kill you faster than you kill me.
That was really, that was the general idea. The general idea was to play defense by playing offense and just force them to block with their attacks, force them to, have to just expend resources, and so that they would never be able to mount like sort of a proper offense. I mean, I lost to Kevin in the finals. He was playing a C deck. That was just something where, I mean, he was another 7-hander. I actually had more problems with 7-handers than I did with 5s and 6s because they had those extra cards. You would think that, less life, like they would be easier to finish off.
Yeah.
But really the fact that if they held the right blocks, if they were sort of smart about it, they could be even more difficult just because of the extra resources they had when it came to blocking.
Okay.
And his attack lineup was like, it was sort of that life, Scorch Wheel, Tengu Dive, just totally explosive, and drew so many cards that, and they were all big damage. There wasn't a whole lot I could do.
I think did he run Firestorm in that deck too? Did he run a copy of Firestorm? Yeah, he did. He ran a copy of Firestorm and Hydrofork. Oh, he also had Stormwath, so the deck was busted too. So I ran. Don't complain, Rob. You guys are both playing busted decks. So, my choice for that tournament was 8th place, Tamarin Cardwell with Dr. Wily 2 on Evil, not Death, but Evil. We were talking before the show, and you said that, and quote Tam, to quote, he played it because he could play Whopper. You want to explain what he meant by that for a second before we move on?
So, I mean, we were giving him like a hard time about why he would pick Evil over Death. Let's go back before that. So he showed up with this and was playing it, and this is sort of like the dark horse of the weekend, like I sort of expected, my deck was sort of new, different, that it would sort of be something that people would be talking about, but he almost like stole my thunder, man. Like, people were really hyped about this deck.
Yeah.
I feel like it was something that people figured was possible because like Skull Fortress 2.
Yeah.
But no one, to that point, I don't think anyone had really put in the time.
Yeah.
And it definitely hadn't like showed up to an event with it. So when he came in with this, and just when you see Skull Fortress 2 when it's hitting stuff,
it's broken,
dude,
man. It feels broken so bad.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so this is like the first time where it really showed up. So, but we were like looking at it, and I know afterwards we were kind of like looking through Ultra, figuring out like some of the other cards that might possibly fit in. And it was really surprising that he wasn't playing stuff like Team K or Team Psycho Soldier, because they seemed like they would really fit well with the deck. Team Psycho Soldier doesn't have Evil, but it has Death. And
he doesn't even have Spires and Dragons off symboled. And all of his attacks have Death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess that's the thing is like his entire attack lineup and a ton of his foundations have death as well because there's so much Guile stuff.
Yeah.
And even on New Alliance that has death and evil.
Yep.
So this is something that easily could have played some of that stuff. And I think he just liked the Whopper for like that extra block.
Yeah.
And it's an ally too, but I think that there were some better things that could have been in that spot. And actually looking at it, I think one of the reasons for the evil choice as well was stuff like Where the Seas Meet and a big job.
Yeah.
Because this deck was kind of like the idea, if you will,
was the gimmick on Gamma Crush.
It was Gamma Crush. It was like the big punch. Yeah. Like that was kind of like the gimmick, if you will, that he was working towards. And I don't think this was like a totally like spike deck yet.
No, no,
it wasn't.
On
F, if you could trade that out for like Cowboy Battery.
Yep.
And, that's just great as well. So, I mean, arguably better. You have to block 2.
Yep.
And,
another reason why he could have leaned towards death, I mean, evil at the time, was because of Revoke. He has Revoke, but
that's true.
Street Fighter wasn't
something that's so easy to
off symbol,
especially when your entire attack lineup has
But if you think, I think this was his second official event, because his only other event was Omaha.
Okay.
Yeah, was Omaha the year where he came in second with Assets Athena. So I think he might have. I know he'd been playing Dr. Wily for a long time, and locals and stuff. So he could have. I could have that. We could. Too bad I couldn't get him on. We could have just asked him and grilled him about it, but. But yeah,
could have asked him why he was running evil and didn't play Damnation.
Yeah, and because he's getting cold. There you go. Brr, 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 brr. But yeah, like I think he's the big job into the Gamma Crush was a big thing. I think he also ran a lot of it because he got hidden in his shadow. Also, was an evil death card. He got Powerful Assassin was also an evil death card. But Powerful Assassin probably should have been a 4 of in that deck, considering how many face downs he got for free. But I can understand.
Powerful Assassin's a really good card.
Yeah. So, but he cited in defensive stuff like Ophidiophobia. Homemade Explosives is one of those defensive, offensive cards. And Novitiate to stop people from drawing cards and gaining life on his turn. So,
right.
But like you could really see the skeleton of the prototypical death build for this. Like you switch out maybe 10, not even 10 cards, and you have the death build for the most part.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, right. This is sort of the list I would say that showed people that you could sort of go ham on these ally things and have like a good deck. And then people kind of workshopped it. I know Phil Birch.
Yeah.
I know Phil, like he saw his deck. He's like, "Oh, I'm building this when I go home." So, you definitely he definitely got some people's wheels turning with this.
Yep.
And I mean, Wiley showed up at a couple things since. I think Kevin won Davey with a death build. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean this deck was something
and then I think
definitely saw more of throughout the year.
I want to say Sean O'Brien came in second at the Poughkeepsie with it.
Yep.
And then Tam also topped at Worlds. I think he got 16th with it with the death build. He swapped over to the death build because he saw the light. He saw the light. Yeah. And then after Street Fighter came out, the death build got even better when it had that. It got prepared to fight. It got
also the champ cards. I guess that works on Death and Evil, but Apples is a good card.
Yeah, Apples is a great card. What's the 2/5 Sagat Foundation that we both blow up a committed face down? Towering over rivals. Yeah, and then so Death got a huge shot in the arm as well with Street Fighter. So that it just powered because I think
what was it? It was
Will,
Willie, right?
Yeah, One Eye Willie, William Bryan got first in after Swiss with the death build with the San Antonio. So next we'll go into the Omaha 2017 PTC. Why
don't you start this?
Yeah, I went with second place finisher Ben Shoemaker and his Yamato Man Wheel and Steel deck. I know Keenan played a version of this deck in Atlanta, but I think Ben took it to Omaha. It was more refined. He played 61 cards, straight weapons, 4 Sagaki, 4 Kersplat, 3 Flame Sword, and then 4 Steel Res and Scorch Wheel, which were the enablers in the deck because you would just run over people with your early weapons, play a bunch of Steel Reses at ignoring progressive for the most part, and then just dumping Scorch Wheels on people. Not that you'd be drawing that many cards with the Scorch Wheel. I think it was more along the lines that it was a pile of damage for free for the most part, and then like with Yamato Man himself, no one's blocking that crap. So they're
not blocking a lot.
They're not blocking a lot. He ran some other pieces. Some pieces he ran. He ran some Stolen Sword, and then Hidden Behind Flames, Petrol Powers, and then his sideboard was completely set for defense with 3 Templar, 3 Power Struggles, and 2 Deliverance. So if he somehow loses game 1, which I highly doubt he ever lost game 1, I think maybe all the way. I think did he 2-0 everybody all the way up into the finals?
I'm not even sure.
I'm not sure. But I know that I remember talking to Danielle during this tournament via messaging, and she said that she saw Ben's deck and she was just giving away wins to people because there was no way she was going to catch that thing. Because
was she playing Yamato?
She was playing Yamato Man off of water. And
gotcha.
So there was no way she was catching that. And he just blew through people. And I think, if I remember correctly, Corey told me that Corey was the only person, maybe Corey was the only person to take him to game 3 in Swiss. Because I think Ben checked a 3 or something on a kill shot. And then Corey was able to come back. He played Dimitri and got disqualified because of a deck list error. But he was able to take it to game 3, but then Ben just rolled him. So,
I think this deck was definitely something that we would have just seen all year, but they ended up banning Scorch Wheel after Worlds.
After Worlds, yep.
But yeah, this deck, I played against it a fair amount. My buddy Scott built it. And this is like just sort of the epitome of check 5s and win, because basically your entire attack lineup, you have a couple things that you'll start off with. Like, you start with that like Flame Sword, show something, it's a pile of damage, it's real fast. And then, you can just play like a 4 diff, like you can play a Kersplat on a 5, and then you commit 1 foundation, and then your next attack's going to be on a 5. And then you just dump all your Steel Reses on 5s, all your Scorch Wheels on 5s. And so, as long as you're checking well with this, like, you're never going to have to commit a foundation to pass a check. So, I played against this at one of your MCS events, and in the finals, I managed to completely tap out my opponent's board on their turn. And he was still able to play like 4 or 5 attacks against me because he just took 5s on all of them.
Was that Tim?
No, that was Scott.
Was that Scott?
Yeah. So this is sort of a wild deck that really sort of abused that all lineup.
Yeah.
And the thing that was interesting about it is, you didn't have to run Yamato Man. He was just sort of one of the better choices because, he's a 7-hander and he put so much free speed on it, which wasn't something that all had a ton of access to.
Exactly.
And
because I know Mark ran J-Ray on top of this deck at the MCS Michigan event, didn't he? And then there's been an Anacris build. There's been a couple other characters.
People ran Andy on it. You could run like Terry on it. You could run literally any all character on this.
Yeah.
And it didn't really lose anything, if you will. So, this was sort of an interesting deck. It was almost like independent of the character. I think, he enhanced it, but you could have had like a blank all character and still run this deck and done well. For this event, I was going to talk about Goro. It's like a fire build for here. I know Tyler Clark is definitely like a Goro player.
Yeah.
I think he's played him on all the different symbols. I think he might have. I don't know if he's topped one of the symbols. I know he topped a couple year or so ago, 2 years ago maybe, on Earth. I know he's at least played the Chaos version. And this is like the fire version. Now this is running a lot of the cards that we saw a ton at Worlds, the Heidi stuff. Strumwoff, Iron Knuckle, sort of like, and then the big thing was Cannonade. So because Goro gets that bonus when they block your attacks, and so what you really want to do with this is you wanted that Cannonade that would sort of force the blocks. If they didn't, you just get another copy of it. So it's kind of like take 7 or take another 7.
Oh, more than that,
if they
right?
block it,
it'd be 7
right.
plus the block mod. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it helps your check, so you don't really care if you're playing like another 6. It had a couple copies of direct hit, so like later in the game, I mean, you set them up where block it or don't, I'm still going to get another copy. And then some of these smaller attacks, I mean, like the Strumwoff, the Iron Knuckle, I mean, these are cards that can sort of pack on a bunch of damage later anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sort of one of those decks that you'll see with Goro sometimes where block or don't, like, you're going to take a bunch of damage anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even that Fire Slash. I mean, opening with a Fire Slash and you, like, reveal a weapon. And what does that go to? It goes to, 9 damage
or something? Yeah,
it
goes to 9 damage, yeah.
So you have to block. Then when you block it, like, you just get beat up anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, I mean, in terms of the foundations, I think it was, like, a lot of just the damage reduction.
Yep.
Wall of Goro, 8K. I mean, first class isn't quite reduction, but it can.
Always watching.
Yeah, I mean, so this is really sort of the kind of typical Goro strategy of just sit there, reduce everything, don't block, like, much at all, and then throw giant attacks. And if they block them, throw more giant attacks and draw a bunch of cards.
I am happy he's going. I hate that character.
I'm not a big fan either.
The guy does too much for free. And I know there's a lot of characters that do a lot for free now, but back then, he, like, when, just that, for a 5-hander, he does too much for basically nothing. Look at Vincent Gray. He has less health, and he has, and it's like, well, and he's opponent dependent on his ability.
Mm-hmm. One of the other interesting things about this is now he's running 3 stops in the side, and that's off symbol, like that's Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, I believe, got into the finals by beating Chris Nixon's Zoe deck.
Yeah.
And I spoke to Chris after the event, and he had said that he felt pretty good about his matchup, even with like some of the damage reduction. Like, she could just throw out so much damage that is really relying on Goro to actually draw that kill turn early. But he said that he was so used to Tyler just never blocking that in one of the games he just like walked into a stop block.
Oh,
that
gosh.
That just completely ended his turn.
Oh, wow.
So, like, that was something that, and especially somewhat like a 5-hander, where if you, like, almost never block, you can really, like, lure your opponent into something with just, like, holding that one card.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're only blocking one thing, it doesn't matter about that. Like, so, as I said in Zoe, where I didn't always have that many foundations, so, like, I really couldn't necessarily pass that check. But, like, a 5-hander, if you built, you can tap out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it kind of doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Like, that's the only attack you're going to block. You can just tap everything, keep all your damage reduction up, and you're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
What was the next event?
Next event was Edmonton in Canada, to our north. I went with the only time this character has topped all year, or probably even been played, other than Sean Bullock playing her, was Lily 2 off of water. William Eisner placed 3rd after cuts were all sorted out. He ran a water build that really focused in on stuffing your opponent's card pool, abusing that gravity hold into whatever came next. It didn't really matter. One thing I did notice, though, he ran 5 2-checks in a 20 attack deck, which is kind of weird. I don't know if I guess that's what they do up in Canada. He ran 3 Yamato Spear, 1 Ragni Cosmic, and 1 Konichi Nomai, back when KOF was legal. He ran, basically what he'd do is he'd flood his opponent's card pool, and then use Muay Thai Prodigy to pump damage. He only played 2 Negli in his deck, and he only ran 1 stop, but he had 1 in his sideboard. So I imagine he'd probably just switch out the assets and actions upon, depending on what his matchups were.
Now, is Negli even that good for Lily? I mean, I guess he just used it for like the form, so like he doesn't need to see it that much.
No. But after playing 4 Cowboy Battery and then trying to dump damage on your opponent, I could see him blowing it up.
Yeah, but then he's gonna have to pass checks. I mean, that's the thing, is he's not really as to, like. So when Kevin was running that in the other deck, like the idea was to blow it up on your opponent's turn.
Another thing too is that he's playing Nomai, so he wouldn't care, because if it was his 4th attack, he could on his 3rd attack dump Negli, put 2 more cards into his card pool, and draw like 7 cards, and then just keep going in. But I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of an afterthought, maybe. I don't know.
Kunoichi no Mai actually seems like kind of a weird card with Lily. Because, I mean, if you've given them like a bunch of cards in their card pool, I mean, they're going to draw 2.
They're going to draw 2, exactly. Yeah. But that's probably why it was a one-of. So I could, and maybe it was just for certain cases. He ran Ancient Knowledge, which was a kind of a weird card, I think. It's that the Meilin flip, if your opponent has more foundations, they add 1, but I don't know. I don't think you'd have a problem unless he was playing against a 7-hander. I don't see him having an issue being outbuilt as a 6-hander with, he's playing 65 cards, so.
I mean, I don't know.
I guess
if you're running like those 20 attacks, I mean, he might be attacking a lot and then just sort of finding himself kind of outbuilt. So.
Yep. Sideboard, he played another Ragni, another Nomai. So I guess he could swap them out independently of each other, I guess. So depending on what the matchup was. 2 Car red-handed. I don't know if that's the byproduct of him not owning Neomax cards or just not thinking he needs. I usually start at 4 and cut usually to 3 normally, but I usually never go below 3 personally. But
I usually start at 3 and decide whether or not I'm going to have one in the sideboard.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Which I totally agree. But let's see, anything else? He ran Crash Bomber, which I thought's awesome. I love that card. That card's fun. Other than that, it's just I picked the deck because it was the only time she's ever topped. There was no Zoe in tops at this, but I think if you just threw Zoe on top of this deck, it would focus it would do better than what he did. I think he might have won.
I mean, it would have done better.
But he lost to eventual champion Garrett playing that water tri-symbol Elizabeth build. So there could have been a chance that he could have still lost to Garrett, but
that's true.
I think Zoe would have a better matchup because you're just throwing more attacks and you're keeping pace with build maybe.
I mean, if you went up against that Garrett deck, there's no guarantee you're playing more attacks.
No, that's also true. Yeah, that's also true.
Speaking of that Garrett deck, that was the one I was going to talk about.
Sure. So
it's listed as Tri-Symbol Elizabeth, but when you really get into the cards, I mean, this is pretty much a water deck. I mean, there are definitely some off-symbol cards. I mean, stuff like there's like 1 Hunt, so that has only death. Templar is only all. But a lot of the other cards, a lot of the attacks, a lot of like assets, foundations share 2 symbols with Elizabeth. I mean, you have most of the Skullman attacks, which are foundations, which are all death and water. You have like some of the
they're chaos. It's chaos, death and water.
Right, but Elizabeth doesn't have chaos.
Oh yeah, I know, but you said all death and water, which whatever. Go ahead.
No, I was saying
I know what you meant.
Have that.
Okay, sorry. I misheard you.
And what I guess some of the Jetta stuff. I mean, those have death and water.
That's interesting.
And so what? Like Cossack Citadel has all in water. I guess there it is. Kersplat that has all in water.
Yep.
HRK all in water. So he definitely had the ability to play on all chains, play on death chains, play on water chains. Sort of as his hand dictated. But at its core, I would say this is like a water deck.
He ran 4 Muay Thai Prodigy in the deck.
I feel like that might have been sort of like a meta thing, where maybe that was sort of like the stun hate that he wanted. I'm not sure.
That or reversing with Guardian Slasher or Spider Suplex would give it extra damage.
That's true. I mean, I guess if he lets his opponent like build up,
a couple attacks,
3 or 4 attacks, and then do it, that would definitely do it.
But it's probably in there for the anti-stun, most likely.
But yeah, and I think if you read some of his comments about this, he sort of said later on that he didn't think that this is necessarily a good meta deck, if you will, because of the presence of base. Because base pretty much just craps all over any deck that is strong on the reversal strategy, which this is. This is a deck that aims to abuse Guardian Slasher. Elizabeth's form lets you basically pitch to get Guardian Slasher back every single turn. And then your opponent pretty much gets 1 attack.
Yeah.
And he'll block it, reversal with Guardian Slasher, pay 4, and they can build. Definitely a lot. It's sort of a classic Garrett deck. And of course, Elizabeth mills off the top 4, so I'm sure he was plan Bing people as well.
Plan B. Then he would gain back his 4 health with, 3 of it with Spider Suplex. So he was only really losing 1, in between.
Well, he also had Curse Splat. I mean, there are a few different ways.
He had some life gain.
Pretty interesting, actually, with the attacks. There's some good one-offs. And again, actually, there was nothing that was a 4 of. It was, 3s, 2s, 1s. And I think that really comes back to Elizabeth, her ability to pitch momentum and get back anything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she's a great character. I mean, she's never not been a good character. It's actually, in some ways, it's kind of surprising that we didn't see more of her just because of that recursion. That's something that just, I guess it probably was sort of her symbols. I mean, until Street Fighter came out, like, Death wasn't really in a great place. Water was sort of a little weird. And, all was decent, but I don't think she's necessarily, like, a great all character. So, I think this is Garrett sort of having fun, and he happened to win and show all of us Americans how creative Canada is.
One thing that lends to Elizabeth maybe not being played so heavily was, like, her best card was on water, being Second Chance, so you could, you basically had it out, you were a 7-hander on your offensive turns no matter what, so that could have lent to it for people who didn't want to, like, do the dual symbol or the tri-symbol decks or something like that. I would say a lot of us Americans are very mono-symbol centric. So we try not to add in a bunch of cards that would clog up our hands or whatever, because we try to play as streamlined as possible.
This is definitely sort of an advanced deck. Yeah. This isn't something that someone would just pick up and expect to do well with. I think there's a lot of decisions that are here. And kind of a bunch of like little things here and there, a ton of one-ofs. You kind of have to have a good feel for what you think your opponent is trying to do, so that you can pick the right card to counter that.
Yep. So we go. I think Vancouver's west of Edmonton, so we go to Vancouver. Do you want to start us off with your deck?
Yeah, sure. I actually took the winner for this, Jay Ueda, playing his 5 Metal Man. Now, I ended up rooming with Jay Ueda at Worlds.
Oh yeah.
We were staying with, I'm gonna blank on his name now, Michael Doyle.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Oh, that's right.
He sort of advertised, like, if anyone's looking for a place, I'm doing like an Airbnb, and we jumped on it. It was super cheap. It was so much cheaper than a hotel. Yeah. Like, it was great. And so we were there, and this guy sort of rolls in, and we're like, oh, hey, like, how, had never seen him before, we're talking, he's like, oh yeah, I won the Vancouver PTC, and we're like, oh, you played that Fire Metal Man list? That thing was sick.
Yeah.
So, it was funny, because we talked to him, and the first question we had was, why'd you only run 3 Walagoro? And he said, well, I only have 3. and we were like, that's what we thought. So we actually ended up loaning him a 4th one for the tournament, and then this is in at Worlds, and then his team knocked out our team in top 8. So that was pretty cool.
Funny story.
Great to help him out. Super fun getting eliminated.
I played him round 1 in singles. I murdered him with Robert because he would dump his hand out, and I played Navos on a 7 just to kill him, and he goes, what's that card? I knew I had him because he didn't know what Navos was. And then I powerfuled it with Robert, and I killed him for his entire life total in one, and I OTK'd him. But he was like, "Oh, that's what that card does? That's sick." And so we, then we went on, and I actually debated citing into Felicia for game 2, and I'm like, "Am I stupid?" Like I actually debated because like I'd get murdered because he was just attacking on turn 1. Like I would eat like 13 damage on turn 1, and just So go ahead and get into that.
So, well, that's the thing. So this deck is, I guess, like a little bit like that Goro deck that we talked about, where it's got just a super, super high value attack lineup. Just Stormwolf, Iron Knuckle, Fire Slash, Fire Slash. So this is really just designed to throw these just high damage moves, and your opponent's like either going to try to full block them or half block them just to take as little damage as possible. And every attack that he can slip through, because he's Metal Man, you basically have to expect to see it every turn for the rest of the game.
He ran 2 Cannon Crack, which was pretty sweet. That's pretty
Actually,
cool.
Looking at this, I mean, this is basically all high, except for Dashing Shield Bash, which is really fast. I know. I mean, if you played him, you probably saw. I mean, he would turn 1. Just go like Strumloff and pitch a card with nothing to pick up. Second Strumloff, pitch a card, nothing to pick up. And he's stunning you. These things are pretty quick, big damage. And the thing about Metal Man is he builds while he attacks you. Yeah. So this is sort of a wild deck.
It kind of reminds me of your Zoe.
I was very interested to see it. Again, another deck that was running Strumwoff. So sort of became a little weaker once that got banned. Yeah. I know that I saw this and I thought the attack lineup was great, and the Foundation lineup just didn't quite. Foundations just kind of didn't quite seem to have the same amount of punch, if you will, as the attack lineup did.
He did run a 1x Dragon Flare though in his sideboard.
Ooh.
I don't know if that was, I'm gonna say that's probably more for the low block than anything.
I mean, it might be. It might just be for momentum strategies, of as a surprise.
Yeah. But I think you could probably translate the attack lineup now. I know it's not as powerful as Sturmwaff, but you could probably dump like Ken's Hadouken in there and at least draw the card so you can at least stay even when pitching stuff for damage. Possibly.
I'm not sure. I mean, Metal Man's such a good character. I think you can build him well in all his symbols. I mean, there was the all build at the Rochester thing. There was like slams. That Giggles played. Yep. I think this is more just such high damage, and the fact that it could come at you so quickly. And honestly, I don't know. I think this deck really thrived on Strumwoff on that. Just low difficulty, huge damage. I don't think this deck would be the same without it. Yeah. But definitely sort of an interesting way, and especially if you saw him play it, because I think he played in a rather unorthodox way. He was definitely a new player, came over from Magic, and I don't know if he's still playing. Just Canada not having as many events, you don't necessarily get to see their players showing up as often. He was very much sort of an all-in aggro player, especially with this deck. What'd you pick for Vancouver?
I went with Richard Newen's Balecore off Evil deck.
Ooh. You just love that evil symbol, don't you?
That, and I just like different characters. It's more of that. I just like seeing different characters top, because as my list progresses, I've picked some not as popular. Well, I guess some of them are popular, but as the first half of the year, as the meta was shaking out pre-Street Fighter, pre-Worlds, there were a lot of different things that people had pulled out. So he was off of Evil, obviously, but his attack chain was also partial order. He could go order if he wanted. And dump Burning Blitz Vortex on people at the end if you wanted to for free +5 damage, because why not? He played, why I mentioned this to you, his foundation base was more along the lines of, there was in the normal evil package, like Ophidiophobia, Good and Evil, Damnation, because that card's really, really good, I heard. He played a 1x Rook Takes Pawn, So I don't know if this was the first time this card topped. I don't remember if Kevin played one in his Vegas deck, but I know that he added it later. I know that he added it for Worlds. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
But he played Thrill of Battle, but with no Merciless Master, which is a no-no.
That's a big pet card for Maryland.
Yeah. But he ran Deliverance as a defense, 3 revoke. He played 1 reprogramming because that card's gas if you match symbols, and it helps him go deep into his high difficulty chains.
Mm-hmm.
One card that really stood out I don't know how he had 4 of it in his deck. He had Psychic Upper, which I think that was more of just for hand peeking knowledge, more than maybe the actual card draw.
It can draw you cards too.
Yeah, it can. Yeah.
And the big thing about it is, it shares evil order and evil. So if he's sort of has, a couple evil, a couple or whatever it's order. So having attacks that have both is pretty important.
But I think that he missed an opportunity by not playing more Death Seal of the Apocalypse, because that card is awesome.
It doesn't have a block, and he's
that's true.
For assassination attempt.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
That could get a little dicey.
Yeah. But I picked it because I have a local player Nate Lucas plays Baelcor on his deck. He plays Baelcor, and
this is almost all mids, right? Except for Psychic Upper, which is low, and Death Seal is high, right?
Yeah, because you need mids to combo for Leap into the Fray. So I think he was dump a bunch of mids, play Leap in the Fray, add a bunch of damage. That's the one thing about the slam lineup for evil, at least. If you're not playing some charges, you're stuck on mids, so you're at the mercy of Templars.
Right.
So for the most part, you're at the mercy of Templar. So he played 50 years in a casket. That seemed like a random card, but I was gonna chalk it up to that it's Canada. So
some of that. Maybe he wanted the low block.
Yeah.
And the big thing too is, like, if you're running assassination attempts, you could just play an attack, commit, gain 2, get rid of it, -1 progressive for you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think it's a neat deck just because it's Baelcor and it's off. I guess it's evil. I guess I have a soft spot for evil decks, so I can't help it, man. Sorry. But well, we moving on, or we did your deck, so let's move on to Little Rock. Why don't you take us away with Little Rock?
Little Rock. So Little Rock, was talking about Terry One Dot, played by Miles Tyler. So Miles pretty much played Terry for
ever.
He's been playing Terry since I played, and probably before that. He's he's finished in second a lot with this deck, and this is sort of, I guess, the culmination is, I guess, the last event that he topped with it, because I don't think he topped Worlds.
No, he did not top at Worlds.
And this is a deck, he's been tuning it forever. Just got a ton of assets, some interesting, foundations. He's got, he was running, the 4 Guardian Slashes as well. I know he ran a lot of reversals in this deck, because one thing that he'd like to do was to get one in Momentum, and then stack it with Merciless Master, and then stack Merciless Master so that when he blocked, he would check that 5 and then use the R for Terry to draw the reversal that he had stacked, and then play it. So, Terry's sort of an interesting character, he's really designed. He builds while he defends, and he also just has that ability to put a ton of damage on stuff, and especially as you continue to block.
Yep.
The assets, that's pretty cool. He's got some great blocks on there, and the big thing is that Terry can get assets as well as the foundations. So, you see something like the 1 Saw Blades, like the Flail and Shield. Kind of weird things. I know when I've played him in the past where he was running Team K, which doesn't look like he even had in his side for this. But that's the same type of thing. He can run that kind of off symbol, like Flail and Shield has just got Earth. You can block with it and then pull it down and, get it out of the card pool so it doesn't matter for his chain. So, this is a big deck, that's 71, but he definitely sort of had it at that point where
I think he's had it in the 80s. I think he's had I think he's had this deck in the 80s before.
He has. I think that was too big. I think he kind of
Yeah.
was able to slim it down and like pull it back a bit.
Yep.
So
he ran primarily reversals. Like all of his attack, he has 4 Kersplat, 4 Slasher, 4 Tiger Kick, and then he had 15 of his attacks were reversals.
Yeah, I think the only ones that weren't were the Shoryudan, which was unbelievable for the Fatal Fury guys because it could
and then
get
HRK
that first one going, and it had that multiple. And then HRK, which was big.
Before we met and really started talking about decks and seeing you play, he was the first real Merciless Master player that I saw because he would do the whole stacking, checking. And, you know, when I first saw that, I was like, I think it was like 3 years ago. So I was only like a year or two into my UFS career. And I was just like, I was like, oh, this is so cool, man. You know, like he's like, you know, like Miles, I got to give that guy credit, man. He's stuck with one character for 4+ years. There hasn't been a lot of people who can say they've done that. So, you know.
Nope.
No,
for better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse, man. Like he was married to that character, and I don't know. Like he is known as the Terry guy. So yeah. So but I'm gonna go on to my deck. I picked Hisenko off of Good. Aaron Young played her and placed 3rd. This was the first time Good had topped all year. We'll see later in the show that another Good deck topped that was just completely different from this. So way completely different. He's just playing really good value attacks. Yami Borai. He only had 3 Cowboy Battery in the deck, which I don't know. I guess people weren't on the Cowboy Battery train yet. So,
I mean, I think that could easily just be he only had 3.
That's also true. He played 2 Chirito, 3 Rantetsu, which I believe is the reversal. If you want to look that up, if you can.
I can pull it up while you're talking
about
it.
And then he played 1X Burning Blitz Vortex because Powerful 5 is pretty good. He had a really neat engine going that if he had a White House out, he would Hisenko for him and then draw an extra card. So he would be a 7-hander after he got technically an 8-hander, I think. Yeah, because you would add 1 and then draw a card. So he would be technically an 8-hander on his turns. So that's pretty sweet. Something I'd never really thought of. I think I'd sold all my cards by then. So at least all the stuff I wasn't really playing. And then also in his foundation base, he played 4 No Surprises. So he would self-mill himself to be able to tutor out what foundations he would need for that. So did you find that Rantetsu?
Yeah, Rantetsu is the low punch that gets +1/+1 for each committed momentum.
Okay.
So.
Okay. He only played 2 Kapoken training in the deck, which I can understand why he could, because if he flipped one and then had another one, he'd bring it in and then maybe blow up one somehow. I don't see how he could blow one up.
Well, I mean, it's good, so I don't know if there's that much stuff where you can really like
think
blow
so.
something
But
up.
I would think Kapoken training would be a 4X, considering normal. But maybe because of blocks and checks, he couldn't have all, because he's already playing 4 No Surprises, which is a 4 non-block. Which is non-block. Up in Smokes, I think, is a non-block. I think a couple of his attacks. I think Chirito has a block. So
yeah, it's a mid.
Yeah. He only had a copy of Astute Observer, 1 Trusted Colleague, 1 Pulled, which we had learned later in the year that if you're gonna play Pulled, just play 4. But again, it's a non-block, so it all depends on how your blocks go. A Focusing Patient, which is a card I've learned to love more and more. I play it just as a 1X because you can. It's great to set up your checks, or if you have like a card that's able to draw off the top of your deck, you can stack your draw, which is great. And the card that will forever be played as a 1 of is Zhang Shi, because I don't think I've ever seen more than 1 in any deck, period. So this is a deck that I would actually like to play. I played a version of Hisenko at the 2015 Atlanta. It was a Chaos build, or 2016. 2016, a Chaos build, and that was I basically just ripped Shane's deck off and then just changed a few cards and then just played it. And I had
like the Chaos version.
The Chaos version, yeah. And in the King of the Hill event, I had like 5 or 6 wins because people I would just the game would take so long, people would just scoop to me after a while because they were bored. So, but she could kill really, you know, she had, the only one thing this deck's really reliant on is momentum. Thankfully, this was before Prepared to Fight came out, because Prepared to Fight would just wreck this deck so bad. It's something that I would actually, technically, I would like to try this deck out. I think Senko is one of those characters that people see her, and they kind of like, they see her symbols. I don't know. Her symbols are actually really good right now. I believe. I think
it's just hard to play. It's really hard to build.
Yeah, because you need to figure out what foundations are ones of, which ones you want twos of. I'm surprised that we haven't seen her come out of like Calgary or something, because she seems like a total Calgary character in my opinion. So
there's a card that I'm actually kind of surprised. I don't think he's running. Dauntless Hero. That's not on his list, is it?
No. Which he
that
could.
Seems like a really surprising omission. I mean, just as like a one diff that you can destroy to draw a card.
Yep.
And I mean, she could just get it back every turn, so that, you know, just further, especially in the later game, like that just basically permanently ups her hand size.
Yeah. Which also I don't see partners in crime fighting in this deck either, which seems like that would be like a 4X in her, because it's a free 2.
It's not a 4X. You just really need to run one.
Maybe like a 1 or 2 of, because once you get one out there, I think it's free. Her ability's free. That's why I know off the Chaos build you would just use bridging the races, and it was just straight value. So that's one card I'm surprised. He ran the Kim Kick, Ho-Ho Heaton Kyaku, just to hate on momentum, which is kind of a weird sideboardy card, but it's just, you know, if you have, I know that if you don't have any momentum hate, that's a good one to have. 1 Leaf Shield, 3 dodge, 2 stop, so it seemed like his sideboard was all defense. So, I think we're moving on to Worlds, right? Off of this? All right, I gotta pull that up. If you have yours pulled up, go for it.
Yeah, let me grab it real quick. So I did Eggs Kyo for this. Who was it? It ended up in 9th place, Christian Moore. He was built on Fire, I think, as opposed to Good, which I feel like we saw a lot more Eggs decks on that. You know, I guess for people that aren't totally familiar with the concept, Explosion is a card that was a promo early last year, or I guess last year at this point, which has enhanced where it gets multiple X, where X is your momentum. And so for Kyo, he can just get momentum every single time you check an attack. So you just kind of sit there, make some checks. I mean, he's running 3 copies of No Surprises. So, you know, he can just make checks on every single attack, just trying to get as much momentum as possible. And then once you get to that certain point, you just throw out the Explosion. You can throw it out late, because of Kyo's R, he can basically pass any check if you have a pile of momentum. I know Tim Keefe, who ended up winning the event, I think played this guy, and he sort of had a rather sarcastic remark. He's like, "Oh, everyone told me to watch out for Explosion, but then you just get hit with double Dragon Flare." So this is another deck that could definitely run that, because it doesn't care about that 8 diff. If you know he has 3, 4, 5 momentum, you know, all he has to do is tap his character, gets like a pile of damage on an already huge attack, and passes the checks like really easily. Being on Fire instead of Good, I mean, he is running out of your league, so that helps, but he doesn't quite have as much protection for that multiple like you would have with like Good and Evil, which right at this point would have been non-unique with the reprint.
Yes.
But yeah, this is just a deck, kind of sits back, does a little bit of damage, you know, as you see like the choke throws, some of that stuff, and just want to get a pile of momentum, and then you just throw that one attack that it ends up being, you know, whatever, like 8, 9, 10 attacks, all of them coming in.
Explosion's a 4 diff, right?
Explosion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 4 diff. So he's also playing Race Against Time in his sideboard, so he could good chain with it and then swap out any of the other 4 diffs for Explosion if for some random reason he never got if he's never seen an Explosion, or if he checks one all game.
Now you might know the name of this card. What was the Leona card that was like F commit all of your Good and Fire attacks?
Oh, that's Leona's Orochi Blood?
Okay.
Yeah.
So like that seems like I mean, I feel like because that should have good and fire.
Yes, it does.
So I'm a little surprised that's not there because that would get you that basically F commit plus X damage for extra momentum spread out over that many attacks.
Yeah.
Or the,
so it's not all on
X.
one. So it's not all on one card. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, especially if you're on fire, I mean, the big thing to run seems like Robot Masters, which I don't think he's running that either.
I only think 2 of his attacks are Robot Masterable unless he gets damage pump from somewhere. Right. So that could be why he doesn't have any natural 4
it could be,
attacks.
yeah. I mean, that's something that you can kind of like switch your attack on up like a little bit to accommodate a bit more. Yeah, I mean, looking at the attacks, I mean, maybe this wasn't sort of like all in, if you will, on the explosion.
Yeah.
This is definitely a deck that, there were other variations of that were
because I know
basically combo decks. I mean, you saw explosion decks that were like, 15 attacks or whatever, and all they want to do is build a giant defensive wall and then just check attacks.
Wasn't that Hillman? Was that Hillman's deck that did that? Because he was off of good, right?
I think so.
I think Hillman was off of good. I think he did that. I think he built the wall like that, and he would just check and just. He also had. I think he played 4 no surprises, and he actually would try to plan B people if he had to. So I picked a guy who came in 1 place above your guy, but who started first after Swiss. Was Mr. Hot Rod Rodney Garland playing Bomb Man off of order.
This deck was awesome.
This deck. I don't know if J Ray still has his soul from fighting this. I
think he got it back. He went on a vision quest.
Oh, did he? Did he get it back? Oh man, it's great. I'm so happy for him.
Basically, he got it back with Disbro.
Disbro just, that's true. But Disbro
patched it right up.
He had the angels come down and lay hands on him. You know. So basically, what this deck did was kind of like I think this would be. I guess you would say this is the epitome of pre-Worlds. Is let's play a high attack count and a value. And just shove bunch of damage on it, like the Zoe, like the Metal Man we saw.
Now there were Tomahawk Man decks as well.
Yeah,
that were
very
similar to this. There were just tons of attacks, almost no foundations. I mean, really, I think this is just a continuation of, like I said, the mature deck from last, I guess, 2016
from Rockford. Yeah.
That was all attacks. And people sort of saw that and it got their wheels spinning. I'm like, well, what could I run that does this? Like. You see some stuff here and there. It
abused Gravity Hold. There was he would go Gravity Hold, something. Whatever. He would pitch like 4 cards. He would pitch 4 cards for Bomb Man's 2 and 2. He would pitch like he get Squishy Wizards, or he would do Bounce Fighters to draw cards. There'd be times he said he went with 2 attacks after pitching 4. Would draw 3 attacks because he would have, Bounce Fighters or Squishy Wizards, which would let him cycle. And then he would murder people on turn 1 because he would be able to time it out properly. He said
so you were talking about the Jeremy Ray.
Yeah. If you know the story better than I do.
I sat next to that matchup. I paid probably more attention to that than I did to my matchup, which wasn't great. I lost that matchup. But I couldn't help myself. So Rodney was going second. He reviewed Sacrifice, which let him draw 2 cards.
Singing the Creed song.
This is his first turn. He has no foundations. Review Sacrifice. That should have been like the first warning sign. So then he forms and discards 2 Balanced Fighters to draw 2 cards to go back up to 8. Then he forms a second time and discards, I think, like something and like a Squishy Wizards. Draws for the Squishy Wizards, discards another Balanced Fighter to draw again. So he's at like 7. He's formed twice. He might have formed a third time. I don't really remember. But he just goes, you don't have a low block, and plays a Gravity Hold, checks an Artifice Avarice, draws a card, and there's a 2-low flash for 10 damage. And Jeremy Ray did not have a low block. So he took that, and then I believe he played another Gravity Hold. Maybe it was something else. It was either Gravity Hold.
Silver Tomahawk.
I think it was Gravity Hold, Silver Tomahawk basically stuns him out, like fails the check on that, and then he had something else after that. And Jeremy Ray playing himself with like 32 vitality or whatever it is, died on turn 1. And the other game was fairly similar.
I played against this deck in teams. So backstory. Me and Rodney had played each other at Worlds, the past 2 Worlds in teams. He played La Bamba off death and killed me with the Etencel's loop. And then this time he murdered me. I was Dimitri this time. Both times I've been playing Life Throws. I was the Life Throws character. I played Mai, died. And then he killed me on his turn 2 both games because he said, I want to have a fun game with you, Chris. He built his 1 foundation each turn. I got to flip it. And then I died. I would gain the 2 or flip it, and then I would die the next turn. So, I was okay. I knew what I was going into, but that deck was awesome. It played 35 attacks, 12 foundations, 8 assets, 4 sacrifices. This deck, just the way the attack turns, everything was a 3 diff except for Feather Shot. Feather Shot was the only card that was higher. And then if you played that, you were going to get hit by 1 billion damage anyways, because they had usually +6 on it if he was multiplying it out. That itself is 24 damage right there. Because it's a 2 or 3 damage attack, right?
Now for
Feather Shot. That's a 2 mid 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's 10 damage coming at you.
He doesn't pump multiple copies, does he?
I think it's all attacks. Look. I think it's all of his attacks. Let me look them up.
I got you.
But yeah,
I like that deck. I love seeing that deck. That was something I sort of had a conversation with him, and he was talking about how he sort of came to build the deck, and he said, I've been working on this list.
No, it's unblocked face-ups. So it's unblocked face-ups. So yeah, so no multiples.
Yeah, you hear that, Thomas? Face-ups.
Face-ups. Come on, Thomas.
Face-downs. So, he said that he had an initial list of this that was 16, 15, 16 attacks, something like that. And he was like, yeah, I kept losing. And I said, oh yeah, well, what'd you do then? And he said, oh, I just upped it to 40 attacks and just won all my games. And, I sort of had a laugh, because obviously I'd played something fairly similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it, I would assume he was familiar with Gravity Hold.
Yeah.
But, he was definitely another one of those decks like that, Tomahawk Man, Zoe, a lot of these characters that just found that they wanted to play a bunch of small attacks and, could either recycle them or pump them in some way. And the fact that it was basically just a 3-diff splam, just a card that doesn't counter progressive. It's just so great as an opener, and especially because it had flash, so it just turned off so many of your opponent's options because they couldn't play any enhances on it.
Yep.
So yeah, man, that card was really, I guess, represented well.
On the off chance that he did block, something, he could chain blade you. By the way, did you know this? He could chain blade you, which I think
I ever saw this. I thought it was more just that skull barrier.
Well, I think because he roomed with me at that world, and I think I played him in a fun game, and he was just messing with me, and he blocked and reversaled me with that chain blade, and I'm like, I hate you, and I scooped my cards up and walked into my room and went to bed because Church was passed out on the other side of the bed, so I was like, fuck you, Rodney, and then I just left. So, because but yeah, that deck was fantastic. It really got hurt after Gravity Hold got banned. I actually think you could technically still... you could technically still play it. It just wouldn't be as efficient.
That's already topped Reno at the end of the year with
you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Definitely similar.
I think it was Chaos too, wasn't it?
It might have been.
It was a Chaos build?
But it was definitely a really high attack count, 15, 20 foundations max. So
yeah. All right, so next on our list is San Antonio. Or How Ryan Pham Got His Job. So
that was actually the deck I was going to pick. I was going to do the Void Athena.
Yeah, go for it.
Sort of talked about this. Obviously, Dan Hughes ended up winning U.S. Nationals with a deck that was quite similar with the Void Athena. And this really just operates, the idea is to get multiple activations out of Silent Assassin, and then either through playing it, getting extra copies out of your hand with Athena's Enhance, getting a copy out of your discard pile with Alpha Male, Really just getting 2-3 activations from Silent Assassin to just leave your opponent with no cards in hand, and then you just play whatever attacks you have. The 4 Rain Flush, 4 Slaughterhouse, I mean, that's great. The Slaughterhouse giving the +2 to the Rain Flushes, I mean, so that's 14 damage on the Rain Flush. That's really all you need. If you have 2 of those, that's about enough to deal with just about anybody. And Athena is just a really strong character in general. The fact, she gets that free build every single turn. Her Enhance is great for getting that piece that you want in play right now. A lot of other characters, they have to see that card in their hand, then they have to play it, and then they have to wait until next turn, where hopefully it doesn't get flipped with spiders. Hopefully your opponent doesn't kill you, whatever. And she just gets to bypass all of that. She just gets it in right away on your attack, and then she even gets to play the next Enhance as well. So it's not even if your opponent has an answer for it, that's an Enhance. You still get to go first. So I know she's a strong character. She's strong on all her symbols. I think you could build a good Athena. I think you could build a Void Athena. Or this was Void Athena. I think you could build a life Athena.
She's strong off all her symbols. I know Church.
She's just a fantastic character.
Church played her off of good at Nats, I believe. I think he played her off of good. I know she's always been one of those characters that has been teetering the line of almost too powerful to okay. She bannable to unbannable.
Here's the thing. I think you would see way more people playing her if she wasn't a Neomax Ultra Rare.
I totally agree with you on that one. I really do. I really do.
If everybody had one, you'd see a lot more.
This deck won without Pulled My Trigger, by the way. So, yeah.
Well, it wasn't out yet.
Wasn't out yet. The one thing that stuck out to me in this deck is only one alpha male, because maybe that it hadn't gotten, that whole alpha male explosion thing that where everyone just dumps alpha male into her now because, the whole...
This was sort of the deck that first did it.
Obviously, yeah. The funny thing about this deck is Shane had taken this deck to the St. Louis 1K a month prior, roughly, scrubbed out with it. Which is kind of weird because, was it the meta? Was it, it was a bunch of different things that, or maybe Shane was just scrubbing out so people can have fun and, people can, we don't know. That man he's just a man of mystery. You just don't know with Shane. So, the deck's fantastic. The 1X Rolling Cutter, that's a Shane staple because every deck should have at least one reversal. I've adopted that. Or your types of thoughts where you got to play DDA, Dimension Door Ambush. If you don't play reversals, like play that. Yeah, those cards. That card not in any of the lists we're seeing now, but that card definitely needs to see more play in the coming year, especially since because it's 2 or more keywords, right? Or is that Soul Trap?
No, it's 2 or more.
2 or more. So that card will just crap all over a bunch of stuff. But that's
pretty much
for another.
We're pretty much at a point now where. Anything to play that.
Anything to play that. So I picked 5th place finisher Joseph Atchison, his Vega Air deck. This was the first event with Street Fighter, I believe, correct?
Yeah. Well, sort of. It was the first event with the boosters of Street
Fighter.
With
boosters, okay.
The
Ryu and Chun-Li thing hadn't come out yet.
The starters hadn't come out yet, so... Right, there were no Chun cards, there were no Ryu cards,
So he played him off of Air, the whole Air Flash package, kind of like how Alexa played him at Nats later in the year. Just playing all the value attacks, Kneecapper, Bear Bite, Concussion Blast is crazy in him.
Concussion Blast is crazy in everybody.
I know, that's a card that doesn't see a lot of play outside of him, though, honestly.
I think it's just the 2-check.
Yeah. That's true.
And
he plays 2 Silver Fang Salvo. I love that card. I play that card in my Shadow Man deck. It's fantastic. I love that card. He basically he just steamrolled people with it. It looks like you just get into desperation, make your stuff faster, do more damage with Zuna drops. Bloody High Claw is a pain in the ass to deal with. Really,
It's a lot of 2 checks, right? He's running 4 Conquest, 2 Bloody High Claw.
That's 6, yeah. But if you think about it, though, they're both 4 diffs when he's in Desperation, so it's not that big of a deal. Yeah. 3 Pulled Demogogen should be a 4th. Spirit of the Wolf, I can see that it kind of combos with the Flash things, but...
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, there's no reason really for him to run any offensive enhances.
Yeah.
You know, you see with like Mind Trigger, it's a lot of the...
Response. Yeah.
Miska 2 support.
Yep.
That deals with like Flash, 88 miles an hour. It's just Iron Will, stuff like that. Anything that's like, you know, an R, like speed or R speed, R damage.
Defensive. He has some anti-stun. It looks like all of his defensive stuff has E's on it, but his offensive stuff is all R's. Jurassic Jungle's in the sideboard to deal with throw decks, it looks like. No Templar, which is kind of odd, but I don't know. I guess that's kind of like a thing. I don't know if you really want it in Vega, as you know, but you kind of still would like some card draw and vitality gain. You don't want to get into Desperation that fast.
Yeah, it's a pretty good card. So.
Yeah, it is. The Journey West comboed, like he doesn't even have Dodge in the deck, which is kind of odd. Which I think Dodge would be played over Templar, at least in this build, because you could Journey West, Dodge, and then if you're in Desperation, you just like roll all your, you know, your attack's much harder to play. But, you know, this is basically the first real solid build, I think. I think there was I was talking to Brian Harris before this, and I believe he was thinking about playing a Vega with punches, with, like playing Valiant Assault and just throwing attacks at people. But I think
we saw one of those in
was that Davey?
Florida later in the year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It just seems, you know, it's Vega, man. Vega will later win a tournament later in the year. We will not name that tournament yet. But I think as the meta grew later on in the year, he gravitated more toward, other than Andrew Alexa, you saw him played off of Death a lot more, just because he synergized those cards a little more, I think. But
one of the other things for speaking of firsts, at this tournament, Miles Tyler came in second, which wasn't the first time that's happened.
Yeah, exactly.
But playing Void base. So the first tournament after Terry 1-dot cycled, he had to find a new character.
Went straight to base, eh?
You know, training weights are off. He could play whatever, and he went with base. And actually, base showed up a ton early on in the year. Base and Dimitri both. I know we didn't really talk about either of them. I actually have a base I want to talk about later in the year. But this deck, I feel like this is probably like a fairly standard list. I mean, it's got the Slaughterhouse. Like some of them will run the Rainflesh, kind of like the Athena. So really, right? I mean, 2 Void decks in the finals.
Void's OP.
But yeah, I mean, base is like a deck, especially like the Void, 1 Void and Earth. It's really simple to like put it together with just his stuff. And kind of flesh out get some trebles in there, and it kind of just builds itself. You know, a ton of damage on everything, safe, so you don't have to worry about reversals. Definitely like a good deck that you can just kind of put a little bit of whatever you want. If you want to run Slaughterhouse, if you want to run something else. And then Dimitri, I mean, he got banned, so it doesn't really matter. But you didn't really see a lot of interesting decisions with Dimitri as far as I was concerned.
I think
pretty much just play some throws, gain some life,
flip some foundations, yada. Yeah. You know, it was I played Dimitri at Worlds on teams, and it was boring. Like, I was going to play him for singles, and the morning of, I went up to church, and I go, I need a new deck for singles because I was bored all day yesterday, so I want to play something fun. So he's like, who's your favorite character at a King of Fires? I'm like, Robert. He's like, let's do this. So we built an Air Robert deck that morning, and I almost made top 16 with it. I got like 22nd, which is surprising. So, because it's Robert, but Robert likes to pump damage, so it doesn't matter. So you could dump Powerful 3 on a Navos at the end of a chain, dude. It does some stuff. So I
mean, he also has a lot of life, which is fairly helpful.
Yeah, 29 life is fantastic in that meta. I know that we're going to do the rest of the year. So I guess we'll do some closing thoughts on this half of the year. We kind of already did. And then in the San Antonio, I want to bring up another deck would be William Bryan playing Dr. Wily off of Death.
Yeah,
so,
we mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Yep.
But yeah, this is really kind of that first Death build. I guess actually no, that's not true because Tam topped.
Tam topped.
Nationals with
Tam topped. This is the post Street Fighter launch thing. He went with Team Psycho Soldier. He had LaMalta in his deck, which is another asset that Tam could have had in his Death build, which adds some extra speed, and if you review stuff, you get card draw off of it. Only one hunt for spiders and dragons.
Hey, I mean,
I guess.
Okay.
Whatever, man. Oh, he had 3 in the sideboard, so okay, that's fine. I just noticed that. 3 in the sideboard. Should be main deck, but whatever. But yeah, you see as I looked at the lists as we went down this first half of the year, you saw things progressing and how things were shaping up as like your Zoe deck, and then there's different decks kind of like that the Bomb Mans and the Tomahawk Mans that we'll get into later in the year. But it's kind of interesting to see where the meta shaped out like pre Street Fighter. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, I think like looking at especially there were a lot of base, a lot of Dimitri, like we talked about, even if we didn't highlight any specific lists. But you definitely saw a lot of those fire attacks as well. I think that was sort of the theme for a lot of decks, especially pretty much up to Worlds, was there were a lot of decks that could play a lot of attacks that could just get big numbers on them with very little risk. I mean, you saw it, like you said, with the Zoe, with the Bomb Man, with Gravity Hold. You saw it with Fireless. I mean, even Tim, who won Worlds with Pharaoh Man. That was Fire Pharaoh Man, right?
No, it was Life.
Was it Life?
It was Life. Yeah, it was Life.
But he was running Strumloff.
Yeah.
And like some of that Heidi stuff. And so he could go in there on turn 1 as well. You saw it with the Wheel and Steel. I mean, that was just about checking 5s.
Yep.
But it's the same thing. It's all these like 5 diff attacks, but they're always on 5s. Those are sort of the big. I know for me going into Worlds, the decks that I absolutely expected to run into were Wheel and Steel and Zoe.
Yep.
Those were decks that I felt like. I mean, those and Dimitri. I think what I would have said were like the big 3. Is like if you wanted a deck that you could beat, or at least have a decent matchup with Zoe, Dimitri,
and Wheel
and Steel.
Yep. The Unholy Trinity.
And maybe Felicia. I mean, I thought that she was still like really, really good. I mean, Ever Hopeful is busted. I guess they nuked that at Worlds as well. But those were just decks that sort of head and shoulders above, and like you didn't necessarily see a ton of them before. Some of them you did, some of them you didn't. But yeah, it was a very fast meta, and just it wasn't something. So like before, some of the decks that you saw win were those like big Navos decks with Garrett, where you kind of just sat there, built up like a wall, and then eventually was just like one big attack that could finish somebody off. And a lot of these are more 4, 5, 6 attacks that, all of them are coming in for like 4 or 5 damage, and you just have to deal with so much. And it's much easier to play offense than defense in the meta up until Worlds. So I don't know where we are now. I guess we'll sort of find out, especially with Street Fighter coming out. So there's some big numbers there, but also we sort of talked about like a lot of 5 diff attacks. So maybe you'll at least have to build a couple turns before you start playing a bunch of stuff. Yeah, but
yeah, definitely.
Sort of find out.
Okay. All right. So we'll call this episode of the Guile treatment to a close. So Rob, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yep.
All right. Everyone have a good night.